The Hidden Inventory arc is a story that takes place in the not so distant past with extreme significance to the current day world of Jujutsu Kaisen. With the events taking place in this incredibly efficient 13 chapter stretch, essentially creating the world of the story as we know it. This video will serve as a deep dive into these 13 chapters from Gojo's past with the goal of convincing you guys that this is the most important story arc in the entire manga so far. Not the best, not my favourite, but without a doubt the most crucial stretch of chapters when it comes to understanding the characters, themes and commentaries that Gege Akutami explores through Jujutsu Kaisen. The plot is fairly simple. The year is 2006, 12 years in the past, and Gojo and Geto are second year students at Jujutsu High that have been tasked with an incredibly important mission. Escort the Star Plasma vessel to Master Tengen, or the Jujutsu world will crumble. This arc is the origin story of Suguru Geto, exploring his descent into madness, ultimately making him the man we know him as in the current day, and it is also the story of how Satoru Gojo became the strongest Jujutsu sorcerer, also the man we know him as in the current day. One last thing before I begin, thank you so much to Mads for the thumbnail art. They are the person responsible for Jujutsu Kaisen colorings that you may have seen if you read through TCB scans, and their work is fucking amazing. I've linked their Twitter in the description, go follow and show some love. Anyways, without further ado, let's dive right into this. This section will serve as a refresher on the events that take place over the course of these 13 chapters. Even if you consider yourself an expert on this arc, I do highly suggest you watch this section of the video because I'm going to be pointing out some hidden elements that aren't so easy to catch at first glance. The arc opens up with Utahime and Meimei trapped in an impenetrable mansion that manipulates space and time, a fitting predicament for Satoru Gojo, the limitless user who can warp space itself, to rescue them from. He is a second year student accompanied by Suguru Geto, another student in the same year. Going into this arc, we knew Geto as the mastermind behind the group of cursed spirits causing havoc in Tokyo since the very beginning of the manga, which makes seeing him here very surprising and equally intriguing. There are various hints that Geto was an ex-student before this moment, but they are few and far between, so many people miss them, and even if you were expecting it, the Geto we see here is incredibly different to the one we think we know in the current day. After both picking on Utahime, they realize they forgot to cast a curtain and the event ends up on the news. This segues into a conversation between Gojo and Geto regarding the necessity of curtains and if regular people being exposed to the Jujutsu world even matters. This exchange establishes both of their individual characters as well as their relationship at that point in time, highlighting some key differences in their mindsets. The conversation nearly results in a fight due to their disagreements, which is stopped by Yaga's interference. He tasks the duo with the important mission of escorting a girl and erasing her. Yaga explains that Master Tengen's curse technique forces the user to change bodies every 500 years. Tengen must merge with a compatible star plasma vessel. This mission is an attempt to prevent Tengen's evolution as it would make him an enemy of humanity and disable the securities he is currently providing to the Jujutsu world. The location of the girl has been leaked and there are two organizations targeting her. The first is Curse User Group Q, who wishes to overthrow the Jujutsu world, and the second is the Star Religious Group known as the Time Vessel Association, who worship Master Tengen as a deity. The Star Religious Group are established by Geto as a non-threat because they aren't curse users, so all of the duo's focus is placed on handling the Curse User Group Q. But everything should be okay, because as Gojo says, this duo is the strongest. Whilst looking for the girl and having a discussion about Gojo's rudeness and lack of respect for his superiors, the duo stumble on the Q group, who are currently in the midst of their assassination attempt. But of course, like Gojo said, this duo is the strongest. They handle the group with minimal effort and save the girl. While this is happening, a former zen'in clan member by the name of Toji Fushiguro has been offered 30 million yen by the Time Vessel Association to kill the girl. Toji meets up with his intermediary for the job at a horse racing competition, which serves as implicit characterization. Toji is usually not the type to gamble. He also has forgotten the name of his own son, who we later find out he is personally responsible for naming. Gojo and Geto are now with Riko Amanai and Misato Kuroi, the Star Plasma vessel and her caretaker. But the job is far from done. There are still 2 days until the full moon, which is when the merging is going to take place, so as per orders from Tengen, Riko can't be taken straight back to Jujutsu High because she should be allowed to enjoy the final days of her ordinary life. To go back to school and spend what little time she has left surrounded by her friends. This leads to yet another disagreement between Gojo and Geto, where the former is thinking more pragmatically and opposed to the idea of letting her go back to school where things could go left, and the latter is insistent that letting her enjoy herself is also a part of the mission. Toji is well aware of how powerful Gojo is, so he devises a plan to complete the job. He posts Riko's picture on the dark web for curse users with a bounty of 30 million yen. He knows none of these hitmen have what it takes to defeat Gojo, so it is essentially free labor with the goal of wearing Gojo down, forcing him to deplete his cursed energy, stay awake, and remain in constant battle mode for the next 2 days. Gojo and Geto are busy dealing with a bunch of hitmen, and the Time Vessel Association capitalizes on this time by kidnapping the caretaker Misato and taking her to Okinawa. The entire process of rescuing Misato is off-screen because it really doesn't matter. The purpose of this entire scheme is solely to wear down the escorts in preparation for the real battle. Gojo, Geto, Riko, and Misato spend time bonding in Okinawa for a few days, just having fun, chilling at the beach, going to the aquarium, normal shit, whilst Nanami and Haibara are fighting for their life at the airport trying to keep things in check. This sequence of chapters is incredibly important for the arc. It helps to build an attachment between the audience and Riko's character, as well as fleshing out the dynamic between Gojo and Geto. They place a lot of trust in the capabilities of the other and really do serve as two halves of one larger entity. When they finally return to Jujutsu High and enter the barrier, Gojo thinks the mission's over and deactivates his curse technique. He is exhausted and thinks it's finally time to chill, but he could not have been more wrong. Toji takes full use of this opportunity and stabs Gojo through the back, and then we get a quick flashback that contextualizes Toji's plan. The reason he waited until Gojo was worn down is because Gojo, as a child, was the first and last person to ever be aware of Toji's presence standing behind him. Gojo insists that he's fine and that taking care of Riko is the priority, urging Geto to continue forward to Tengen's chamber and complete the merging. But Toji is no joke. He fully capitalizes on his lack of cursed energy, rendering him an invisible opponent whose presence cannot be sensed, and lands a killing blow on Gojo, stabbing him through the neck with the special grade curse tool, the Inverted Spear of Heaven, which forcefully stops any curse technique. Just outside of Master Tengen's chamber, in the main hall of the Tombs of the Star Corridor, Geto gives Riko a choice. Continue on with the merger for the sake of humanity, or forgo the merger and continue enjoying your life, with Gojo and Geto being responsible for any repercussions that may come with the latter decision. This is something that, for once, Gojo and Geto both completely agreed on. No matter what choice Riko makes, Geto promises that the duo will protect her future, and just as she makes her decision of continuing to enjoy life, she is shot in the head by none other than Toji Fushiguro. Geto doesn't understand how Toji is capable of sneaking up on him like that, because he thinks that firstly, Gojo should have been able to handle him, and secondly, Geto should have been able to sense him. But the invisible assassin is aptly named. As previously mentioned, he has zero cursed energy, making him undetectable like any other regular human, and also giving him the ability to easily infiltrate barriers. He is as powerful as he is solely due to his martial might and skilled usage of cursed weapons, just like Maki. Toji explains that the cursed spirit he uses to store objects is also undetectable because he ingests it and stores it within his body. This is a similarity he shares with Geto, who also ingests cursed spirits as a result of his technique. And on top of this, Toji's 5 senses are heightened due to his lack of cursed energy. He followed Geto and Riko by tracking their odors and footprints. This man is a complete beast and the pinnacle of what non-sorcerers can achieve in the Jujutsu world. He makes short work of Geto just like he did with Gojo, and only spares Geto's life because he's unsure what would happen to the curses Geto has taken in upon death. Despite all their blessings and natural talents, Gojo and Geto are destroyed by a monkey who can't even use Jujutsu. Toji finally remembers Megumi, and that blessings is something he personally named his son. He goes on to deliver Riko's corpse to the Time Vessel Association. We get some exposition on the history of Master Tengen and their role in the Star Religious groups, but Toji doesn't really care. He's done with the job, he wants his bag, and he wants to leave. But upon leaving, he bumps into a familiar face. One he thought he had killed. Satoru Gojo has figuratively risen from the dead, completely rejuvenated and ready to fight again. On the verge of death, Gojo gained a proper understanding of the core of cursed energy, allowing him to use a reverse curse technique to reconstruct his body parts. It is time for round 2 of this battle between the pinnacle of the Jujutsu world and the pinnacle of non-sorcerer humans. And this time, Gojo absolutely washes Toji. Not only is he in a much better physical condition, but he has evolved as a combatant and reached new heights entirely. To end the fight, Gojo used the purple hollow technique, an imaginary mask that erases Toji's entire arm and a piece of his torso. A fatal blow. In these final moments, Toji tells Gojo about his son and implicitly requests that Gojo takes care of him. Following the fight, we immediately get one of the darkest moments in the entire manga, where the Star Religious group members are clapping for Riko's corpse. Gojo offers Geto the chance to kill them all, but he turns it down, considering it pointless and still sticking firm to his belief that there needs to be a reason for Jujutsu sorcerers to kill. And then we get a time skip. A year has passed since this fateful night that changed the life of these two boys forever. Gojo has made even more growth in the last year and now stands alone as the strongest sorcerer. Geto is now isolated and struggling with the constant cycle of exorcism and consumption, as well as grappling with his purpose. Why do Jujutsu sorcerers protect these humans that are capable of so much evil? The combination of these two things has driven Geto close to insanity, to the point he is mimicking Toji's words and inwardly referring to them as monkeys. He asks Haibara questions about how he feels about sorcery, and Haibara's response really reminded me of Yuji when I first read this. He just wants to help people, that's it. He doesn't really question the consequences of his actions and looks at things very simplistically. Yuki, a fellow special grade sorcerer, arrives on the scene. She explains her absence by sharing her research and her plan to change the world by tackling its issues from the root cause. She wants a world where curses don't even exist, and this idea is incredibly appealing to Geto. The two solutions she comes to is to either eradicate cursed energy or to teach humans how to control cursed energy, both very difficult ideas to bring to fruition. In this conversation, Geto proposes an idea that will eventually consume him: mass genocide. Why not just kill every non-sorcerer? Yuki responds by claiming she isn't that crazy and tells Geto that he needs to decide what his true feelings are. He needs to pick between looking down on non-sorcerers or following through on his duty as a sorcerer. Yuki leaves shortly after this, but before leaving she reveals that Master Tengen had stabilized despite Riko's death. We skip forward some time and Haibara died on a mission to take out a grade 2 curse, but the area was known for a guardian deity's religion, which evokes strong negative emotions that would most likely make the curse a grade 1. This serves to strengthen Geto's hatred for humanity, his feelings of loss for his sorcerer brethren, and his hatred for religion that is further contextualized in Volume 0. He compares being a sorcerer to running a marathon, but the finish line is nothing but a hill of his fellow sorcerers' corpses. And finally, we arrive at the turning point. Whilst out on a mission to stop a curse haunting a village, Geto exorcises the curse but finds two little girls being kept in a cage and blamed by the people of the village for the curse's actions. The people are consumed by their ignorance and insist that these two innocent little girls are monsters, which leads Geto to his breaking point. He massacres the entire village, 112 residents killed by none other than Suguru Geto, the man who we could consider an exemplary sorcerer at the start of the arc. Geto reaches out to Shoko, who calls Gojo, which leads into the final moment of this 13 chapter masterclass, the final conversation between Gojo and Geto. Geto explains that he wants to create a world without curses by eliminating non-sorcerers without exception, even killing his own parents to prove his resolve. Gojo repeats Geto's previously held notion about pointless killing without a purpose, but Geto argues that there is a purpose. Gojo claims the sentiment is impossible, but Geto knows it's possible because Gojo himself could do it. Are you the strongest because you are Satoru Gojo, or are you Satoru Gojo because you're the strongest? Geto walks off telling Gojo that if he wants to kill him, then do so. There's meaning in that too. But Gojo cannot bring himself to do it. And with that, the recap is over. Holy shit, that was way longer than I was expecting. I'm sorry about that, but if you skipped to this part of the video, or if you finally made it through it, let's actually talk about this arc. Let's actually analyze this arc, what you guys are really here for. The central ideas this arc explores and utilizes within its narrative are as follows: identity, fate, perception, progression, meaning, and self-affirmation. These are the most important ideas to these 13 chapters. There are obviously different things also explored, but I can comfortably say these are the core themes of the Hidden Inventory arc, and in turn the entire manga. I will be explaining all my reasons for why I believe this to be the case throughout the rest of this video. There's also a recurring thing of Gege subverting the audience's expectations, and this reflects the theme of perception. The idea that there is always more than meets the eye is very crucial to Jujutsu Kaisen. This can be seen in the two parties that pose a threat in this arc. The less worrisome of the two serve as the central antagonistic force, whereas Curse User Group Q are decimated in a matter of moments. This arc serves as the foundation of the manga's thematic framework. It establishes everything for the story to come and adds further weight to various moments in the 64 previous chapters. It's the beginning of everything in this story, and later arcs wouldn't be anywhere near as effective without it. The main reason I'm even making this video is because it's necessary for me to get through this before I can make my Shibuya analysis. But now that's all out of the way, let's dive into the meat of this video. I like to view the character dynamic of Gojo and Geto as something that lies on a spectrum. It's pretty hard to explain, but I'll try my best to include a visual that further emphasizes this point. At the start of the flashback, Geto is the voice of reason. He is righteous, disciplined, and easily the model sorcerer out of the two, living in what he perceives to be an ideal world. Gojo, on the other hand, is nothing like that. He is pretty chaotic and constantly questioning various aspects of this ideal Jujutsu world as Geto perceives it. But by the end of the flashback, and as a result of the events that took place on that pivotal night, it's almost as if they switched places. Of course, it's not a complete 180, and there are several nuances to their respective characters that make it difficult to explain in a simple manner, but they do switch places, with Gojo ending the arc as the exemplary sorcerer who understands his role in the world, while Geto has become the chaotic individual who isn't only questioning the world, but trying to enforce a plan to reshape the system. But like I said, it's not that simple, because right from the very beginning, there are cracks in the personas that both of these characters initially displayed. In their interactions with the Q soldiers, we see that Gojo is a lot nicer than he seemed, and Geto is a lot more brutal than he seemed. Gojo offered to spare the life of his enemy if at any point in their fight he cried and apologized, and contrastingly, Geto's enemy is begging for mercy, and despite the upstanding and righteous persona he gives off, Geto's just chilling whilst using his curse to harass and make the enemy uncomfortable. Another cool example of this is when Geto displayed genuine concern for Riko's emotions and supports her spending time at school, despite the potential risks this poses to the stability of the entire world if she is killed. Gojo, on the other hand, is way more mission-oriented, with his eyes set on the objective. The exemplary sorcerer out of the two is focusing on the girl's feelings, whilst the misfit is focused solely on the objective, another contrast between the two that adds more cracks to their initial personas. In Okinawa, they switch places, with Gojo prioritizing Riko's feelings and Geto prioritizing the mission. Right at the center point of the arc, in chapter 72, it's revealed that Gojo and Geto were on the exact same page about something from the very beginning. They're very similar but also very different, and the placement of this interaction that contextualizes both their mindsets going into this mission is very interesting. The fact that it happens exactly halfway through is when we get this flashback, that kind of adds credence to my belief that their dynamic is presented to lie on a spectrum. This is one thing they were on the same page about completely, and it happens right in the middle of their respective character arcs. This dynamic is very subtly written, with a lot of nuances that reflect the changes both characters undergo respectively throughout these 13 chapters. Gojo and Geto are truly best friends. They have a pretty love and hate relationship in the sense that they're always butting heads, arguing and fighting, but at the end of the day, there's nobody in the world that they trust more than each other. And this idea is established right from the beginning and reinforced in countless moments throughout the arc. They truly care about one another very deeply, and due to their immense strength and how that constitutes their joint entity of being the strongest, it creates an equal split between them. They are two halves of one whole, until of course Gojo evolves. We'll talk about this a lot more in depth later on in the video, but Gojo's evolution is a big aspect of this dynamic and intensifies the extreme changes Geto undergoes. Corruption is something that takes time, which is what makes Gege's decision of including a 1-year time skip after the fateful night in the Star Corridor such a fitting decision. Geto changing overnight is hard to believe, but slowly sinking into his doubts whilst his one and only best friend is doing better than ever is incredibly compelling and makes his descent feel more believable. Gojo is now taking missions solo, developing multiple new techniques including a domain expansion, and can now be considered the strongest by himself, no longer just one half to their joint identity, but a separate being entirely. And this is further enhanced by their final interaction. Geto poses a question that can be viewed as a commentary on free will versus fate. Is he the strongest because he's Gojo, or is he Gojo because he's the strongest? Is he a moral agent that chooses to live his life the way he does and accommodate the position of the strongest sorcerer, or is he just accommodating that position as a result of his fate, being born with Limitless and the 6 eyes, and thus ultimately being constrained by a predetermined fate? Is Gojo just another necessary cog in the world of Jujutsu sorcerers that was placed there by design, or does he consciously choose to live his life the way he does? The answer to that question is wonderfully tackled in Gojo's interaction with Yaga. Gojo understands that he cannot save those who do not want to be saved. He cannot impose his fate of being the strongest on those who do not wish for that to happen. He is only as strong as people allow him to be out of their own free will. Riko is a character that not many people talk about, despite her extreme importance to the narrative of this arc. Instead of being a walking, talking plot device like most characters in her position are reduced to, she is presented as a fully fleshed out human with complex emotions that we get to see wonderfully expressed over the course of a few chapters, ultimately concluding in her tragic death that changes the trajectory of Geto's life forever. This is why I really appreciate the time spent during Okinawa, the slice of life portion of the arc away from the battle and just giving the cast some time to chill and get to know each other. Her character speaks to the core themes of the arc very efficiently. She is bound by the shackles of fate as the star plasma vessel and lacks her own individual identity as a result of that. Her story is about initially recognizing herself within a framework necessary for human survival and completely diminishing her own personal feelings, but through the time spent with Gojo, Geto, and her caretaker Misato, she comes to terms with how she actually feels, the fact she wants to continue living and gain her own individual sense of identity and purpose within the world. But that's all stripped from her when Toji kindly shoots a bullet into her brain. The fact she doesn't turn into a vengeful spirit, at least from what we currently know, is something really interesting. Because all humans have some level of cursed energy that derives from negative emotions, but Riko died smiling. She died at the height of her life. Geto freed her from the curse of fate and responsibility by providing her with a choice for the very first time in her life. So I think the reason she doesn't turn into a vengeful spirit is because at the moment of her death there was nothing vengeful within her. She dies crying literal tears of joy as a massive weight is lifted off of her shoulders. Beyond her individual character, her application in this arc is fantastic for the progression of Gojo, and inversely the regression of Geto. Gojo becomes kinder, more loving, and more appreciative of the weak through his time spent with Riko, whereas Geto focuses solely on the bad. As much as he appreciates Riko, he views her as a special case among humans, and the people who went so far to kill this innocent girl are what he chooses to focus on, which fills him with disgust and malice towards the entire population of non-sorcerers, ultimately birthing his master plan to wipe them off the face of the earth. I've already spoken about the spectrum dynamic of Gojo and Geto, how Satoru starts off pretty chaotic and the furthest thing from an exemplary sorcerer, but ends off the arc as nearly the complete opposite. But what exactly brought about this drastic change? Of course, there are a number of things like Riko, but the most important is Gojo's understanding of the core of cursed energy. Through quote-unquote death, Satoru Gojo evolved into another being entirely. In order to activate reversed curse technique, you have to multiply negative energy together to make positive energy. A way to make this easier to understand is to look at energy as emotion. Negative energy derives from negative emotions, thus kinda making them one and the same. Gojo claiming he understood the core of cursed energy is pretty hard to comprehend without looking at later context from Shibuya and beyond regarding reverse curse technique, but I don't want to talk about that here. I want to focus on what is immediately clear about Gojo's evolution. In his battle against Toji, he internally apologizes to Riko for not feeling bad for her death. To quote, Gojo says, "Sorry Amanai, right now I'm not angry for you, nor do I feel vengeful towards anyone." The use of the word vengeful in particular here is so good, because what happens to sorcerers who die without the use of cursed energy? They become curses, they become vengeful spirits, but through this near-death experience where Gojo doesn't actually die but instead transcends, he becomes something incapable of feeling vengeful towards the person who killed his friend and almost killed him. Gojo has achieved a state of zen, complete understanding and enlightenment that is deeply rooted in religious symbolism and Buddhist philosophies. I don't want to open this can of worms in this video because it requires a lot of work and I should probably save that for a separate video, but the point is, Gojo truly becomes the strongest here. He realizes the full potential of cursed energy and becomes, without question, the strongest Jujutsu sorcerer in a way that Geto cannot possibly hope to match. We learnt from Todo in the Goodwill that cursed energy exists in mind, body and soul. The way Gojo is fighting, with no proper stance or uniformity but rather flowing freely in battle, reflects that idea perfectly. Gojo is reveling in this battle. He is having the time of his life and embracing the moment wholly, with no extraneous thoughts or any focus on anything else whatsoever. He's purely living in the moment, which ties into the previously discussed point of free will versus destiny. Satoru Gojo is the strongest because he is Satoru Gojo, not the other way around, and definitely not because of a predetermined fate like Geto suggested, which does play a small role but fails to account for everything else about this man beyond his innate curse techniques and abilities. Another aspect of this I really love is that Gojo evolving through his quote-unquote death completely juxtaposes the main purpose of the arc. The entire plot to get Riko to merge with Tengen is the opposite of what happens to Gojo here. Tengen's curse technique is immortality, and to get it to function as it always has, they want to prevent his evolution, whereas Gojo evolves by facing death and learning to function in a way he has never before in the past. This is both an evolution for Gojo as a combatant and as a person, because those things pretty much go hand in hand within JJK. The way somebody fights, their curse techniques, their methods and attitudes within battle, all of these things are reflective of the person they are. In Volume 0, we see Geto's sentiments towards religion and just the concept of theism as a whole, which are contextualized by the events of this arc. Riko's death being a product of the Star Religious Group's efforts is something that makes him feel this way, and Haibara's death as a result of cursed spirits that are products of the negativity surrounding the belief in a deity reinforces this idea. The Time Vessel Association celebrating the murder of a little innocent girl is one of the darkest things in the entire manga, only truly surpassed by something else Geto witnesses later in the arc, the final nail in the coffin, but we'll get to that in a bit. It's genuinely chilling though, seeing these, religious worshippers clapping for a dead little girl's body. Geto's descent into madness is orchestrated in a way that kind of makes you sympathize with him and want to root for him in a way, God forbid. These people are sickening to say the least and don't deserve to be protected. But immediately after Riko and Toji's death, when Geto first sees this clapping for a dead little girl's body, he's still trying to maintain his original stance as the voice of reason and keeps a level head, whereas Gojo is tempted to kill everybody there. But the devil is in the details, and this page is a masterclass of facial expressions. When he originally explained his stance about protecting the weak and needing a reason to kill somebody at the start of the arc, he was smiling and looked as if he genuinely believed in his words. But now, he looks incredibly conflicted. His words don't reflect his face, he looks sickened and consumed with anger, which is a fitting description for the man whose innate curse technique forces him to consume cursed spirits, the product of human negativity. Gojo, on the other hand, does look pretty sad, but not angry. Like he said in his fight against Toji, he doesn't feel vengeful towards anyone. He wants to kill these people because he thinks it's the right thing to do and that they deserve to die. Not because he's angry with them and wants to avenge Riko, because anger is a foreign concept to him. Vengefulness or vengeance is a foreign concept to him now. His face when he poses the question to Geto is very stern. He isn't thinking based on emotion, but rather based on reason, which is such an interesting thing to come from Gojo, considering he is literally asking Geto if there needs to be a reason. It's contradictory in a way, but of course it is. Gojo has literally just undergone that evolution I discussed, and it's not like he's gonna completely transform ideologically in the same day. Rather, this is something that takes time and is very subtle, which brings us on to the 1 year time skip. I'm really glad Gege took this approach because change is something that takes time, and it makes this drastic change that both of these characters undergo feel that much more organic as it slowly takes form over the course of a year with various different factors playing into it. Especially Geto's descent, there are countless things that lead up to his final decision. Geto finds himself trapped in an endless cycle, going through the disgusting, strenuous process of protecting humans from the very curses they created. Exercise, consume. Exercise, consume. And no, I'm not talking about weightlifting and then eating food. I'm talking about exorcism and then eating the very curse you just exercised. All for the sake of protecting the people who created those curses to begin with. Geto begins to question why Jujutsu sorcery is even a thing. What's the point of it all? Why protect these people from their own problems at the cost of your sanity and, even worse, the cost of countless sorcerers' lives? Geto is ideologically distorted by the events of that fateful night, and this is reflected in the artwork, where the memory of the Time Vessel Association clapping is visually distorted. We get a conversation between Geto and Haibara where Geto asks him how he feels about Jujutsu sorcery from a fundamental and ideological perspective. And of course Haibara gives a very simple surface level answer. Helping people makes him feel good and he isn't the type to think too hard about things. His character foils Yuji in a way, and Geto foils Megumi, which is another reason why this is such an important arc to understanding the characters. Geto is obviously unfazed by this answer, but the next person to join the conversation provides him with something much more tangible. But before we talk about Yuki, there's one small detail here I really love that I want to address. Haibara says he's a pretty good judge of character, to which Geto responds, present company included. This is obviously about Yuki on the surface, but I think this comment is also directed towards Geto himself. Can Haibara tell what's going on through Geto's head right now? Does Geto even have a specific character at this moment that can be judged? It's hazy and distorted even for himself, and I find it to be a brilliant piece of subtle foreshadowing of what's to come. Anyways, Yuki. This conversation gives Geto a route out of this mad cycle he is trapped in, but the conclusion he comes to is unfavorable to say the least. Yuki has a plan to reshape the Jujutsu world through a different method. While typically sorcerers want to fight the symptoms of negative cursed energy, Yuki wants to kill it at the root of the cause. Non-sorcerers leak cursed energy at a much higher rate than sorcerers, so she wants to educate them on how to use Jujutsu or find a way to eliminate cursed energy from their bodies entirely. However, Toji through heavenly restriction is the only case in the world Yuki found where someone had no cursed energy at all. And this is where Geto has his epiphany and asks, why don't they just kill every non-sorcerer? He is literally recommending mass genocide to Yuki, to which she responds saying she isn't that crazy and tells Geto he needs to decide what his true feelings are. Geto must pick between looking down on non-sorcerers or following through on his duty as a sorcerer. This is where Geto's eventual plan to eradicate all non-sorcerers originates from. This conversation, Yuki inadvertently and unintentionally unlocked Geto's insanity. And shortly after this, Haibara died, which further sent Geto down the path of darkness. His death being associated with religious belief, as previously discussed, is just the cherry on top of what makes this moment another variable to Geto's descent. But the final nail in the coffin is of course the two little girls being kept caged and abused by the villagers who conflated the incident caused by a curse with the sorcery powers the girls were born with. You have to be the one to decide. There are so many layers to this line. That line is applied to Geto's descent to madness, his choice to kill everybody in the village and commit to his plot of killing every non-sorcerer in the world because they are the root cause of all negativity in the world. But it can also be applied to both Yuji and Megumi's current worldviews at that point in the story. Megumi was making decisions based on his conscience. Yuji wanted to save everyone, but who's to say someone you save won't kill somebody else in the future? You have to be the one to decide, and you have to bear the consequences of those decisions. And Geto, of course, completely bears those consequences, going so far as to kill his own parents, which is absolutely insane, but also the ultimate proof of his resolve. They are non-sorcerers, and letting them live out of a personal attachment to them would be incredibly hypocritical of him. Geto has given up on the world he once swore to protect and doesn't care if no one understands him or if it's even possible to pull off this plan. He's gonna follow his heart regardless, and if Gojo were to kill him right then and there, he would accept that too, because there is meaning in that in the same way Geto's actions hold meaning too. They are simply exercising their ideals and following their hearts. Another cool detail I really love regarding Geto's descent is that the person Geto makes an example of at the end of chapter 78 is the exact same person from the Time Vessel Association that received Riko's dead body from Toji. The person who brings him to the religious group that he takes over is the exact same person who gave Toji the job to kill Riko. There are countless ways that Toji impacts Geto's descent, and Geto mirrors him, which we'll be getting into in just a moment. Toji Fushiguro is a zen'in clan exile suffering from the expectations imposed upon him by his family and the judgment he received for not meeting those expectations. His character is largely formed on the basis of three ideas: the crushing weight of his life's predetermined fate, the burden of how he is perceived by others due to that, and his pride, born from struggling against the two other ideas. His appearance in this arc is not only a new character introduction, but a long-awaited and explicit reveal of Megumi's lineage. we finally get to meet the father he has spoken so badly of. He is also introduced in a horse racing competition which characterizes him. The comment about him not being the type to gamble foreshadows his gamble in fighting against Gojo at the end of the arc, whilst also speaking to his master plan to wear Gojo down. He definitely isn't the type to gamble, at least not usually. We could talk about Toji for literally hours, but I'll try to keep this as condensed as possible and focus on my absolute favourite details packed into this arc. Toji's weapon, the Chain of 1,000 Miles, can extend infinitely, which represents Toji's character perfectly. Chains are associated with fate in all forms of literature. His entire life, the person he is, was dictated by a myriad of factors outside of his control, things that are and can be attributed to the fate of life. The best aspect of this symbolism is the single condition it requires. It only works so long as you don't let the base of the tool be seen. This represents Toji's endless struggle with perception, specifically how others perceive him. Toji is bitter, suffering from being judged since the day he was born for things out of his control. Toji forgetting the name of his child, who he personally gave that name, but remembering an encounter with Kid Gojo that happened years before Megumi's birth, fantastically highlights Toji's struggle with fate and the judgment he received due to it, which ultimately created his need for self-affirmation as well as his petty pride. The fact that a kid sorcerer could notice his presence due to innate curse techniques he was lucky enough to be born with angered Toji to his very core, to the point he never forgot about it. Through suffering from matters that were out of his own control, Toji vowed to fight against the very concept of perception, and with that, all forms of pride, since pride by nature is derivative of perception. He won't be proud of himself or proud of anybody else. He will fight against the very notion of pride. Toji's plan to kill Riko by wearing down Gojo and Geto through orchestrating non-stop conflict with the sole purpose of draining them of cursed energy, or for him to swoop in at the most opportune moment and finish the job, speaks to his character wonderfully. He is calculated and pragmatic. He is doing this out of a genuine acknowledgement of Gojo's capabilities. He knows he can't defeat him in a fair fight, but above all else, this pragmatism corresponds with his vow to fight against perception. But that petty pride of his catches up to him in the end as the pinnacle of Jujutsu sorcery stands in front of him. He wanted to discredit it, to crush it, and he wanted that for self-affirmation. By fighting purely for himself, Toji deviated from his true self. The Toji who lived by fighting against the very concept of perception, not letting it get to his head, concedes to the suffering at the hands of that very perception and lets it consume him, ultimately leading to his demise. The multiple comments on Toji's uneasiness throughout the fight is proof of this. Toji knew he was unmatched, he knew he was gonna lose there and die there, and on top of this, he didn't even need to fight. He has already accomplished his objective and been paid for it, and he stated in the past that he doesn't fight for free. But his hatred for the system and the judgment he received from his family is far too overbearing. He can't give in. The man in front of him is the ultimate representation of his hatred, so he self-destructs. The pinnacle of Jujutsu sorcery versus the pinnacle of martial might. Fighting freely versus fighting with chains. Living in the moment versus being consumed by extraneous thoughts. Gojo and Toji are diametrically opposed in this battle in so many ways it blows my mind. Let's wind it back a little though. Toji versus Geto. Toji swapping from a cursed tool to a regular gun is one of those small details in this arc that serves to enhance the intricacies of cursed energy as a power system really well. It's a very simple thing, sure, but that's exactly what makes me appreciate it as much as I do. Gege's attention to detail cannot go unnoticed. It's really great to see. Toji ingesting the cursed spirit is something that connects him to Geto. They both know that wretched taste, and this moment is so crucial and pivotal to Geto's drastic change. Toji is the encapsulation of everything Geto comes to despise about non-sorcerers, but he ironically becomes a lot like him in the process. But you guys, with all your blessings, still lost to a monkey like me who can't even use Jujutsu. Very interesting that the insult Geto uses henceforth to describe non-sorcerers comes from none other than Toji, the epitome of human evil in the eyes of Geto. And on top of this, how ironic is it that Geto's survival in this fight against Toji, who is the product of ostracism due to a predetermined fate, is only because of the curse technique he was born with, a predetermined fate. And lastly, it's very fitting for Toji only to remember his son's name, which means blessings, when he defeats both halves of the strongest, the pinnacle of the Jujutsu world, who sat at that position as a result of their natural blessings. It's almost like Toji has proved everybody wrong. He has conquered all the doubts about him, he has conquered all the false judgments about him, and even without any cursed energy, he defeated the pinnacle of the Jujutsu world, the strongest, and it is only then that he remembers the name of his son, which also ties into this idea of blessings and natural talents, which is just really cool. Very, very cool stuff, Gege Akutami. Very cool indeed. When you really think about it, Geto vs Toji and Gojo vs Toji are very similar fights, just flipped. Toji destroyed Geto and represented everything he will one day come to hate, whereas Gojo destroyed Toji and represented everything he had always hated. I don't really have much more to say other than that. It's just really cool how they mirror like that, how they represent the differences between these characters just in the nature of the fights themselves. Toji's individual characterization is phenomenal, but the way he is utilized within the narrative of this arc and impacts other characters is what makes him one of my favorite characters in the entire manga, despite having such a little screen time in comparison to others. The arc's ending transition back to the present is one of my absolute favourite things in this entire manga. Where things leave off in the past, Gojo had just lost his one and only best friend, but in the present he realises he's no longer alone and has a genuine smile on his face, in comparison to his usual overconfident and snarky smiles. This one is completely genuine, and it's just beautiful. Found family is one of those tropes that always hit me really hard, and Gojo being my absolute favourite character in the manga already just added to that. What a phenomenal flashback. I really hope I explained why I feel that way about it, but man, it's kind of hard to put some of this into words. It's really impressive how Gege accomplishes all of this in just 13 chapters. But yeah, I hope I explained why I consider this to be the most important arc in the story. I mean, it contextualizes Gojo's position as the strongest, Geto's reasonings for who he is in the current day, and the themes it explores are incredibly relevant to the main narrative, proposing questions that are still being tackled from a variety of angles through Yuji, Megumi, and the rest of the main cast in the current day. I really love this arc, but the next arc is one I love even more. I'm planning a massive video essay for that, which will be coming out hopefully on Halloween if all goes to plan. Thank you very much for watching, and please do leave a like and comment sharing your thoughts to help with the algorithm and support the channel. It's been a pleasure. Peace.